Green is the new gold. Our 18-hole Niklaus design, award-winning golf course and clubhouse will leave you green with envy. We don't just say, we do. It's the Stain City way.
Good afternoon and a very good Monday to you, and welcome to Real Talk right here on SABC3. News reports of a 22-year-old water polo coach from Parktown Boys High abusing up to 20 pupils has left the country stunned. The abuse has also started a conversation about something that is not often talked about: male rape and sexual assault. Reese Mann realized after his own experiences of abuse that there were no support systems in South Africa for males. This prompted him to start the South African Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse, or as we know it's SAMSOSA. He joins me now to talk more about this story. I mean, across every news station today, on every radio station, it was the leading story. Surely this cannot be an isolated incident, Reese.
Absolutely not. It's not an isolated incident. It's been probably happening in all schools past, and it's going to happen continually unless we start addressing it. I mean, the figures are now 1 in 6 males will be sexually abused before the age of 18. For females, it's even worse. It's 1 in 4.
When it comes to boys' schools, it's always cloaked under culture, tradition. This is how we've always done things, you know? And that's just the pupils like acting on each other. What can we do when it's a teacher? And I mean, I understand he was a past pupil there.
I think it is within a boys' school as well as a mixed school. We brought up in a patriarchal society, and men are socialized and boys are socialized to a position where they don't talk out of turn. So men are not supposed to show emotions, men are not supposed to talk or if we want to say, blitz on another male. And then there's also within the school culture, and specifically a boy culture, that the school brand and the school's reputation comes first before anything else. Now, in the situation with Parktown, there was a power play there, in that a 22-year-old teacher who was a coach, who was also popular. And this is what happens with grooming, is that he's in an ideal position. He's a sportsman, he's popular, he's got a reputation, popular amongst parents, popular amongst the sporting fraternity, popular amongst the boys themselves. So he's created an environment, a hub that people will not believe anything that's negative said against him. Then he starts isolating the young boys. And then there's a uneven power within that relationship, that he's got the power. So these young boys, and we as adults always look at this and we say, why didn't they speak out? Yeah. Why didn't they say something? But we as adults are not thinking in a 13, 14, 15-year-old's capacity and thinking at the moment. Because that power play again that takes place, all the power is in the teacher's hands.
So me now as a mother, and the reason, I mean, we're speaking about phobias today, but after the story broke, I was like, we have to do something about it. So I'm watching the show, I am a mother, I am a father. What conversations should I be having with my 12-year-old son, my 11-year-old son, to make sure that even though there is a power play, even if he's the popular teacher and he's got the support and the swag and the popularity and the school tradition behind him, how is my child going to come home and tell me that?
I think the first thing is what you said, is having a conversation is the most important thing. You need to have a conversation with your children, open conversations about sex, sexuality, and specifically with males. We need to get past the question, and we need to start having a discussion with our kids about gender, about masculinity, and how we see it as a family. And we also have to break that mindset that young boys can't have emotions, that young boys can't cry. And that's where the secret is that young men are not supposed to show emotions. They're supposed to get over it, man up and
Ooh,
move on.
mommy's little boy, look, you know, somebody pushed him, somebody touched him inappropriately, now he's run to go tell the teachers.
And in the incident like we had at the school, I don't believe that in the period that we are in now, that it would have come out had there not been video footages.
That's exactly what I was
because
thinking.
the child would have been isolated. They would have, if a few pupils would have known about it, the reputation of the school, the reputation of the water polo team and everything was at stake. They would virtually be silenced by everybody and within the culture thereof. And then it would have been if one boy came out, who would have believed him? Who would have believed him? You've got a popular coach, you've got somebody who the school likes, somebody who the parents like, somebody who the pupils like. Nobody would believe them. And that's what we always say. If anybody talks to you, specifically kids, believe them, listen to them. Because specifically on this subject, kids are not going to play around with this subject. And you asked about the conversation. You need to have all of these conversations, but not just come and tell me. You need to reinforce and say, if you do come to me, that makes you a better man, a stronger man, a more masculine man, because you're facing these very important challenges in your life, rather than just ignoring them. You have to tell them that it doesn't make you, it's not going to make you gay.
You're not a snitch.
You're not a snitch. It's not going to make you an abuser. Because a lot of these myths is why young people don't want to come out.
But now I understand that he's since resigned, and obviously we think he was pushed out and he was fired. But this teacher, this water polo coach, he's now since resigned. But I also understand that he's a past pupil there. Do you think that maybe when he was there, that it's a bit of a cycle that had happened to him, like a teacher had done that to him, so it's kind of like the norm in their lives?
I can't answer if in this specific case, but if a person has been abused, and depending on the social, the environment, and the psychological position of the child at the time and before the time, the child can move on and become an adult, an abuser. However, somebody who has never been abused, with certain psychological dispositions, with being whatever happened in their childhood, but no sexual abuse whatsoever, can then also become an abuser. So it is not a general rule that they will become an abuser, because career pedophiles, and that's what he would have become, is about the challenge. And they're normally above intellect. They've got a manipulation skills that are far beyond anybody else, and because the child is so young, far beyond the child. They want to manipulate the situation to be able to be in a position where their desires of control, because it's not about the sex, it's about the control, the manipulation. And pedophiles are very patient, and they will go into positions where they've got access to children.
So, and I mean, I know I actually want you back so we can have a full episode on this. This was just pressing because it was breaking news today. I want to know how you came to start your organization, Sam Sosa.
Okay. I came to start my organization because at the age of 39, things just got too bad for me. And I was sexually abused as a child, also by a sports coach. And then as a young adult, I was gang raped. And I actually felt that I felt and didn't speak about it because of all these myths. I felt alone. I thought I was the only person in the world that this has happened to. And I found there was nowhere where I could talk out. There was no support groups. There was no peer. Alcoholics have Alcoholics Anonymous and there's peer. Drug addicts can talk to a recovering drug addict. A male who's been sexually abused is not coming forward. And a lot of the males
talk about it, you must toughen up.
Yes, and a lot of the males we have are normally about the age of 35, and they're talking about it 20 years after the event. So they've left with that secret and the anxiety and the trauma for 20 years. So I felt there was no organization who can deal with it. So that's why we started. We first started with the website and getting the information out there. Now what we do is we also have peer-to-peer support. Exactly the same as we found that psychologists are very effective. However, a lot of males want to speak to another male
who's gone through the same thing.
So he doesn't have to explain the emotion. He doesn't have to explain
the shame and
the shame,
the guilt,
the blame, the guilt, all of these things that they have. So now we are empathetic towards those things because we've experienced it ourselves.
I agree with everything you said. What is your website?
www.samsosa.org.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Off the bat, the thing here is that parents, we must have conversations with our children and allow them to come to us without thinking that we are going to be judgy and questioning, so that things like this do not happen any longer. Reese, thank you so much. After the break, we'll be talking about phobias. Stay with us. Welcome back to Real Talk on SABC3, where the stage is yours. Have you ever been gripped by a fear so intense that it's left you feeling like a prisoner in your own body and mind? Whether it be a fear of an animal, an object, an activity, or even a situation. Does this fear manifest in physical symptoms such as dizziness, breaking out in a sweat, or shortness of breath? Has this fear become so persistent that it interrupts your way of life? My first guest about phobia is a psychologist from the Meriting, am I saying it right? Meriting Center.
Yes.
Meriting. Lerato Msimanga, welcome to the show. Meriting.
Anele. Yes, Meriting.
Meriting, because earlier I was going meriting. You know,
That's one word.
my western side comes through so easily and just lands. Meriting. Listen, to people who don't have phobias, right? Does it look like we're overreacting when you're like, I have a fear of heights, I have a fear of rats, I have a fear of dark spaces? Does it just seem like we're overreacting, you must just calm down?
Yes, to a lot of people that don't feel that extreme anxiety, it can feel like it's exaggerated, because at a certain level, we all feel fear, we all feel anxious, but for some people, it can be debilitating, can be extreme.
So what is the psychological definition of a phobia?
So let me start with fear.
Okay.
Because it comes from fear, and you all feel fear. Fear is a normal response to a threat, whereas anxiety is fear response to perceived threat. And phobia would be the extreme of that, when the anxiety, when the response is a bit over.
Okay.
And often it's because there's the fight and flight response which floods the body, where there's, like you mentioned earlier, the heart palpitations, racing thoughts, and it feels like, you know, there's doom impeding. So it's, for the sufferers, it's very real.
So could there be a blurred line between me, so for me and snakes? Let's just say, is it me not liking them, or am I scared of them? How do I know what the difference is?
There's fear involved. At a certain level, it's normal for a person to feel something that they know is poisonous. They know that some snakes kill. So there is that fear.
Yes, and some strangle you and swallow you.
It's real. But often then, with the fantasy, sometimes it can take over reality, where there's not even a snake around you, but the fear is constant.
Lerato,
so the fear doesn't
You're telling me I watch too much TV, isn't it? I must stop watching Anaconda when it plays. All right. So where phobias like stemmed from? Like where's the base of them?
The causes.
Yeah.
There are various causes to phobias, and often there's an interplay between the environment and hereditary. Some people are more prone to developing anxiety disorders, and sometimes it's an environment where you're exposed to a lot of trauma, or there's emotional neglect, or
like
there's
lots
physical
of uncertainty in your life.
Yes, often with physical abuse or emotional abuse, people start anticipating danger or threat, and that can develop into anxiety or phobia at certain times. So it depends on the individual. And
when it comes to phobias, is like, must I treat it immediately? Do I wait for it to develop? I mean, how quickly can you pick up on a phobia and say, okay, fine, you know what, let's treat it now?
Okay. with diagnosis, there needs to be a certain time where you've experienced the anxiety or the phobia. And I think clinically they'd say if you've experienced it, for anxiety it will be over 6 months. With phobia, it will be the intensity. Like if it's the first time you're going on a plane and your response is extreme, where it feels like you are just going to die, and then you can then diagnose that as a phobia that needs to be treated. And it also depends on how it affects your daily functioning. For some people, they'll have the phobia, but it's manageable. Sometimes the intensity can be so big that you need to do something about it.
Is our initial response, like and our bodies, to something that is a phobia and a fear, are the symptoms the same for us? So the base of the symptoms, but then obviously if it's a, you know, a plane and a rat and the dark or claustrophobia, then it kind of branches out. But I want to know, like, do we all feel the same, like the fear and the shock and the sweat and the heart of the symptoms of phobias?
Not always. People are different.
Okay, that's what I want to get to.
For some people, it will be more the heart palpitations. For some people, they can't even explain what happens to them. It feels like there's depersonalization, where it's as if they'll just disappear from where they are right now, and just it gets confusing even for them to explain what happens to them. So it's different from individual to individual, and sometimes that's why it's difficult to even diagnose or even for people to talk about what's going on with them, because they feel like they're alone. They feel like this is just happening to just me.
So earlier you said something about your body going into fight or flight.
Yes.
Is that when your body goes into survival mode?
Yes, which is an evolutionary process that it's inbuilt that we have, but often that response is not necessarily useful to a setting like when you need to give a speech. You can't run away. You can't fight. You need to
calm yourself down.
Yes, you need to be able to manage and cope with the discomfort that you're feeling. But for some people, they may not necessarily have the coping skills, and sometimes there's also shame involved with that, because they're feeling like, oh my word, people are going to see that there's something wrong with me, and then it gets exaggerated.
But here's my thing then. If your body's natural reaction is to protect itself, then surely when you have an anxiety attack, when you're short of breath and you can't breathe and you, 3 minutes away from dying, surely that's not normal then. That's not your body protecting itself.
The mechanism are supposed to protect you, but it's happening in a place where it's not useful. There's no lion there. You know, the body was built to survive in the wild. There is no physical danger. But it's reacting, it's giving the same physiological response to that physical danger. It's more or less the same. So that's why sometimes people can't differentiate what's real and what's not, because it feels like, oh my word, it's...
Can some phobias develop into mental illness? Like, can a phobia drive me so crazy that, like, I go crazy?
Well, phobia is classified under mental illness. And often you also need medical intervention, because it can prevent you from living your normal life.
Like if I have phobia of crowds, how are you going to work if you can only work at home? Do you know, you can't go to school?
You have people with social phobias, and that makes it difficult for them to leave their house.
How do you treat somebody who doesn't want to leave their house?
Yes, it can get that difficult.
But how do you, like, I don't want you to give me your 7 years of medical experience here, but I just want to know, like, somebody who doesn't want to leave the house, like, you know, what's the first step? Do you first come to their house as one person, then 2 of you start coming, then 3 of you start coming?
Sometimes you have to get the family involved. Because sometimes you find that family might also be enabling their behavior, and sometimes they can also help to start the conversation and then get them to agree to go and seek medical advice.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a few fears here, and I'm not making this up, and you will know this.
There's lots
of fear of bathing or being clean. What is there, like a medical term for that? Declinophobia or something?
I think there is a name for that.
There's a name for it. Yes. How would you treat that? Do you also want to get the family in?
Generally with phobias, it also depends on the modality that you use. But first it will be to understand what does that phobia represent for that particular person. How do they understand it? What triggers it? What are they trying to avoid? So it's different for each and every individual. You may have the same phobia, but causes and prognosis and treatment may be different.
Have you come across somebody who's got gelatophobia, the fear of being laughed at?
I think there are people who have that, and sometimes these phobias are also
codependent.
Coexist.
Yeah.
Like fear of being laughed at. People might have social phobia, and you might find that it's exaggerated by fear of people laughing at them.
Okay.
Like I say something,
and then we laugh.
Mix up my words, and people would laugh, and then it just exaggerates the social anxiety. So sometimes
Yeah, okay. Listen,
they
after the break,
coexist.
we're going to meet Reuben, a school teacher who battled anxiety through therapy and medication. Stay with us. Welcome back to Real Talk on SABC 3. The stage is yours. 2 years ago, my next guest found his life so affected by anxiety that he ultimately sought therapy and even started taking medication for it. A teacher by profession, his anxiety eventually became so bad that it affected his speech. But today, he joins us to come and spread the message that life doesn't have to stop just because you suffer from a debilitating phobia. Please welcome Reuben Nakane. Thank you so much for joining us, Reuben.
Oh, thank you very much.
A teacher with anxiety problems, surely that affected your pay or your money?
Not necessarily my money, but my performance in a way.
Yeah.
Yes, because obviously as a teacher you need to speak and to present and to you know, to share or to give information and knowledge. So when you find yourself in a situation whereby your anxiety is too high, then it becomes a little bit difficult for you to express yourself the way you were supposed to, especially when it is at the highest level, whereby my heart palpitation is too high. Then I'll struggle to communicate well in certain instances. Yes.
So what situation would trigger your anxiety? So, because I mean, I get that it wasn't every day where you go to work and you get an anxiety attack.
No. Actually, I started to have a serious problem of it, I think January 2015.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I didn't have any problem. So I might not necessarily be able to point out a specific situation that this might have caused. I think maybe it's a combination of quite a number of things that I might not be able to say this one specifically has contributed to it.
Is that common where you develop into it where it was never an issue and then all of a sudden you start having them?
Yes, it does happen, and sometimes you find that you may have experienced trauma in a certain area, but then the fear and the anxiety is transferred to another area that may not necessarily be related, and you're not even aware.
Is this why, let's say, if I get mugged or my house gets broken into or I get hijacked, you know, people always say you must go for therapy, you must go for counseling because, you know, just so to make sure you find that, is this to make sure that the incident that happened doesn't manifest itself in another fear?
Yes, so that you process the emotions, you put words into what actually happened, you deal with the emotions, because often we don't really talk about emotions in our communities. We'll talk about what happened and not necessarily
how it made me feel,
how it made you feel, and what happens to those feelings.
I felt disempowered, and then that feeling then gets transferred to something else.
Yes.
Reuben, did you go through therapy?
Yes, although I firstly went to general practitioners, and I eventually went through therapy for about 8 to 12 sessions. And yes, it helped to a certain extent. Then I eventually even go to a psychiatrist for maybe once. Then I went through a medication thereafter. And yeah, it went a little bit down. But I think the turning point was because I'm a very spiritual person by nature. So I then decided to focus much on positive things about me, and in particular on God, because I realized that really psychologists and psychiatrists have done their part to a certain extent, but certain from where I was to another level, then I need a divine intervention. Then God help.
But now, as you know, as a black man, right?
Yes.
You know, there's culture, head of the
Yes.
house,
Yeah,
must be strong, can never show weakness. You know, he must talk. He gets the drumstick. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just all this, you know, thing that you have to be. Was it difficult for you to confront that and say, I'm going to go for, you know, the therapy. I am going to go speak to somebody about this?
Yes. As I said, that going to psychologist was something that I did after quite some times. As you are saying that, as a man, I was just telling myself that I'm going to go through this thing. I'm
going to fix it myself.
I'll fix it myself. I didn't even share it with my spouse to that extent. But I eventually realized that, you know, I really need a therapy and somebody to talk to, and who has a depth knowledge and understanding of what exactly I'm going through, and who will be able to help me to cope with it, with those exercise. And I think they did help a lot.
When you say something like exercises, what exercise? Because I know my sister used to have anxiety attacks, and she was told to count a lot. You need to count to calm yourself down. Is that the correct method?
Could be another coping mechanism that you can use.
So when initially we're dealing with things like anxiety attacks, is that what you infiltrate into the treatment, coping mechanisms?
Yes.
So
that you're able to tolerate the frustration.
When do we go to medication?
You can use it in conjunction with the treatment, especially if you need to be exposed to that thing that you fear. If you need to take a business trip, you need to be on a flight, and you're busy with your therapy, then it will be advised maybe you take medication if you're still in that
And what's the medication? Is it like calming pills?
There's
rescue,
rescue remedies if you want some natural things, but antidepressants can also be used. There's benzos that also calm you down. So there's different types of medication depending on what is it that you're struggling with the most.
Reuben, did you ever get to medication phase, where you had to take pills for your problem?
Yes. Then I went through, I did take the medication, and but I eventually dropped the medication for various reasons. Although I might not be able to, I might not encourage people who went through what I'm going through to drop the medication earlier, because our situation differs. So in my case, I dropped the medication. I went through medication, then I left the medication before even I can complete it. Because
why?
No, no, for obvious reasons, the side effects.
What are the side effects?
The side effects, for example, you will find, I found myself in this situation. After I've taken the medication, I have to maybe urinate, go to toilet, no?
Okay,
yes,
so it's...
And another thing, that it also affected my sleeping pattern, you know? Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
So you couldn't sleep?
Yes.
Okay, so then did your doctors recommend that you drop the medication?
Not necessarily, because the medication is prescribed for a certain period. So, but before I can complete that period, then I decided to drop it.
Can you describe one of your anxiety moments that happened, like one of your attacks? Like, what happened? What did you feel? What did you think was happening?
I think heart palpitation.
Did you think you're having a heart attack?
Yes, yes. Because even initially when I went to a doctor, I said, no, I think I'm having a problem with my heart. Actually, I think I had a heart attack. Then they go through an examination and they realize that, no, you don't have any problem with the heart attack, actually. And then they prescribe the medication. One of the doctors said, no, my lungs, yes, a little bit bigger, then they disturb the heart, no. So everyone was trying to come up with the plan as to exactly what might be the problem. Yes. When
was your last attack? The last time you had an anxiety attack, when was it?
I think it came to a point where it's no longer at a particular time, but general.
Oh, okay.
In the way that it's just
so
I'm just coping with it.
With you sitting here, when was the last time you had an anxiety attack?
As I'm saying that, I may not be able to say last week or...
Oh, okay, so you can't say that.
Yes.
She's not experiencing panic attacks,
Uh-huh.
but is experiencing generalized anxiety, which is present
all the
throughout,
time.
all the time.
This is why we had to have a translator. So, all right. So, can that ever be healed, where you are totally healed of it and you are rid of all anxiety in you?
I'd like to believe that it does happen, but a lot of patients that I've seen, they learn to live with it, because to a certain extent, we all feel anxiety. And sometimes it's getting to understand that there's a certain level that is normal.
Okay.
So
Okay.
learning to manage your
anxiety.
Your anxiety.
Reuben, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
thank you. Woo! They say that the proof is in the pudding. Well, the psychologist is here. I may as well consult her about my own fears. After the break, we speak about Anele's fears and anxiety and attacks and all of that. Well, this is not funny one little bit. Okay, so my fear is snakes. Okay. My fear is snakes, and the team thought it would be a good idea for it's moving its head for it to come on set. And yeah, I thought that'd be cool. Hi, Clint. How's your friend?
He's very friendly.
Oh, okay. Apparently he's famous and stuff.
Yeah, he's quite a celebrity. He's our mascot for education, reptile education.
Okay, and why do you have to do reptile education?
We believe that the fear all stems from beliefs of and growing up not knowing
Careful,
about
his
the
head is
animals.
coming the other way. Take him back.
I'll grab him back. There we
Take
go.
him back. Okay.
So we believe, especially
Yeah.
reaching out to the youth to educate them when they're young to get over those fears, and slowly but surely manage to protect such an amazing species.
And I once read that this is the albino one. Am I right in saying?
Yes, this-
And they're becoming extinct.
A lot of them are endangered due to, amongst other things, the leather trade. So by keeping them in captivity and being able to educate people and people have a awareness of not every animal is dangerous. In South Africa, there's over 135 species of snakes. And out of those, only about 35 are actually venomous and only about 8 are actually lethal. So not every snake is a bad snake.
So why am I scared of it?
It's probably the upbringing. A lot of people are told that they are all dangerous. So a lot of people fear them because of the unknown and not being educated about the animals themselves.
So why am I scared of it? Why am I scared of snakes? Lerato, come, girl, talk to me like a professional.
When did you first realize that you were scared of
When I was
snakes?
small, there was just, when we lived in Petersburg, the gardener found a snake in the garden, and then I never went into the garden until we moved. So I don't know, I just feel like they'll kill you, I guess.
Okay. And how did your parents respond to that? Was there any adult that helped you to
My mom laughed.
to process the emotions? And it's possible that then you were left to your fantasies to decide
What snakes do to you.
yes, what does this snake mean for you?
So how do I face it? Let me actually start here. Is it the smartest way to get someone to deal with their phobia, to make them confront it?
The idea is to have exposure, but you started with, the intensity smaller until you get to the actual
You don't get the
snake.
biggest one, right?
You don't start with the extreme, so you
Is that the biggest snake?
desensitize.
He's about half grown at the moment.
Half grown?
Yes, yeah.
Is he going to get bigger than that?
He'll put on about another 2 meters and about another 70 kilograms.
Are those snakes dangerous? What happens when they feel like they're in danger? What's their coping mechanism?
Their coping mechanism, if they feel threatened, is to attack in the wild. But a captive bred animal like this is extremely docile. He's a puppy dog and educates thousands of children around Johannesburg every year.
Okay. So, I should have started small.
Gradual desensitization. You don't start by flooding the system, because sometimes it can even re-traumatize you.
Which is, I feel, is what's happening now. Okay, so how do I deal with re-traumatization? Oh, I think we have pretty much kept the most awkward episode by far. Okay, so what's my step from here? Do I get up and touch it during the ad break?
If you're comfortable to do that, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay.
And sometimes getting that exposure and seeing that, you know, your fear, that anxiety is not gonna overwhelm you, can help you to overcome or manage even your anxiety. So if you're comfortable, you can try and touch it and just get a sense of what happens inside of you. Because I hear you worried about what the snake will do,
Why
how the
aren't you
snake will
stressing?
cope. I don't have that fear.
Oh.
I do understand that it's a captive snake. We've had a chat. I am comfortable around it.
Is there something like cultural phobias, like where you find like a group, like I don't know if I'm outing black people here, but you know us and cats, like, you know, they're like, I don't want a cat.
And owls,
yeah.
yes, because of the stories that you get told growing up and what you associate those animals with, it can create phobias.
And actually, what about things like homophobia and xenophobia and all of that? Like, where does that fear? I don't even think we should be calling them phobias. I think you're just not a nice person if you don't like people for a sexual orientation or for the color of their skin or where they come from. But where do those stem from?
For some individuals, often it's their own internal world. I've often seen people who are homophobic, who may have their own unresolved sexual issues, and then they take it out on others.
So when it comes to something like, can you ever cure that, the homophobia or xenophobia?
And more than anything, it's allowing the person who's experiencing the homophobia or the xenophobia to understand what this thing means for them. Why are they so homophobic? What is it about them that makes them feel overwhelmed or traumatized by other people's orientation? I see you.
No, what's the snake's name? Whatever its name, it moved. Jake. Hi,
Yeah.
Jake. Jake moved towards me, so I was just being careful there. So how old do you think people should, it's going up your neck, how old do you think people should be before you like at what age do you start the education of snakes?
Well, anywhere from around about 4 or 5 years old, all the way through to high school. It's all about education. And usually when we're talking about touching the snake, we always make sure that we are aware of people's phobias. So we ask the children to put their hands up if they are a bit scared, so we don't bring the animal close to them. And slowly but surely you'll see the children develop, and as they see their friends touching the animal, they'll actually come up and touch the animal. And even if it's just with one finger in the beginning, at the end of the day, they might just come up and run and hug him and kiss him.
You know, I think I did myself a disservice because when I was in grade 3, they did take us to a snake park, and then I was like, I don't want, but it just came in a bucket, and I was like, what? When last did it eat? Why is it in a bucket? Like, what does our friend Jake eat?
Jake eats frozen thawed rabbits and piglets, and he eats about once every 2 weeks or so.
Oh, so he's not halal.
No.
Joke. Okay, listen, I'm going to go to an ad break. Jake and Clint, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anele.
You're going to get up slowly, ne?
I will do so.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Great. We'll be back. I'm back. Okay, welcome back to Real Talk. The stage is yours. Today we've been getting education on phobias. I had a snake in here. Look at me. I live to tell the tale. I'm fine. She gave me such a great coping strategy. You must put both your feet on the ground, because I was shaking my legs because I was scared. But I'm here and I'm full of nonsense again. My next guest has been receiving treatment for her anxiety that she suffers from as a result of claustrophobia. Wow. Welcome, Melanie Harrybarran. Am I saying your surname correctly?
Indeed.
Harrybarran.
Yes.
Claustrophobia, right? So do you like walk into a space and immediately feel like this space is small and I'm not comfortable?
Yes, pretty much so. You kind of don't walk into a space, you avoid it actually at all costs.
So do you go into a lift or do you choose the stairs?
Well, I never used to before I started receiving the treatment. I avoided lifts. I avoided anything, banks, closed spaces.
Banks, because you have to go through that little door.
Yes, that door. That door was a killer for me. So,
but that's like 3 seconds of your life, though.
Yes, indeed it was. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so what else do you avoid? Banks, lifts,
aircraft,
locksmiths, because those things are always very small. You're just like, guys, where's the space? Yeah.
Yes.
And were you always like that, or did it develop?
So, no, as a matter of fact, I wasn't always like that. It just came from nowhere, actually. I think, though, it was triggered by a trauma I experienced, but it wasn't immediately related straight after the trauma. It did come some years after, you know, and yeah, and it just came out of nowhere.
Can you share the trauma with us?
No, I don't feel comfortable.
Okay,
yeah.
but did it have with you being stuck in a very small space?
No, it had the trauma.
Yeah,
it had nothing to do. It was actually a loss. And that's what for me it's unrelated. But that's what I believe caused it.
It comes back to what you were saying, that, you know, something can happen on that side and it manifests itself here.
In another area.
Because in my mind, if you've got claustrophobia, you know, maybe you were stuck in a car as a child and you almost suffocated, or you used to get locked in a room. So it's not always those situations.
It's not always clear cut. It's not always that straightforward.
So when was the first time you had a claustrophobic attack? Can you remember?
So that was about 4 years ago. And it happened on an aircraft. That was the first time. Walking towards the aircraft door, through the passage there, I could actually feel the palpitation starting, and the sweatiness and the tingling of the hands and the feet. And I didn't know why. But the minute they closed that aircraft door, I set up to leave the plane. And and that was the first time. But fortunately, I was traveling with a colleague who had recognized the symptoms. I didn't even know. I mean, I had no clue as to what was happening with me, and she managed to calm me down for that flight and so on and so forth. From then on, I managed to avoid
flying.
Correct.
So then, did you think that you were scared of airplanes and you hadn't registered that you've got claustrophobia?
Yes,
okay.
Indeed, I did, yeah.
So you were in the Greyhound there, girl.
I was trucking.
That was your life,
yes,
city to city. Can one phobia then become another one and another one and another one?
Yes, and sometimes with panic attacks, it happens in an environment and you start fearing a similar kind of environment. Often panic attacks happen when you least expect them. You'd find that you're sitting in a taxi and suddenly getting palpitations. And the palpitations, the panic attacks have nothing to do with what is happening in the taxi.
It's something.
It could be triggered by something that had happened, something that's going on in your head, and you start associating your panic attacks with being enclosed in a car or in a moving vehicle, and you start fearing being in the same situation because you fear that you might have another panic attack.
Okay, so how soon after do you then get the proper diagnosis that it's not planes that you're scared of, it's you've got another issue that you are traveling with?
So when it's really started affecting me, when I work in a travel consortium. So my business is to travel.
Oh, wow.
So when you start wanting to leave your job to do something else, to avoid the plane, taking 14 flights of stairs up to see a customer,
girl,
then you then you realize there's a problem. Yes.
What are you like in your car?
I wasn't okay, but I'm good now. I'm good.
Who diagnosed you and said, you know, you've got claustrophobia, but it is because of this?
So I only started receiving the therapy the beginning of last year. Monthly, I go once a month. And that's my psychologist. Can I say his name?
Yes.
So his name is Shai Friedland.
Yeah.
And he actually you know, through the therapy, started talking, yeah, and he said, look, this is what you're suffering from. It's extreme anxiety caused by enclosed spaces, claustrophobia.
Lerato, how quickly as a psychologist do you see what the problem is, right? But you have to take your time in peeling the person so that they can see it themselves. Do you ever find situations where as soon as they walk in and they tell you what's going on, you know, but you yourself have to be gentle in your approach?
Often, yes, because some of the anxieties or what brings the person into therapy might be something that they feel comfortable sharing. And there might be underlying and deeper things that they may not necessarily feel comfortable, you know, with the first meeting. So often you have to take the time and sit down and peel things before you can give it to the patient, because sometimes they can feel overwhelmed and even run away from therapy when you tell them or when you try and make sense of what they're struggling with. But often people with anxieties, the interesting thing is when they come to therapy, they come expecting that you will take away the anxiety.
But you can't. You can only give them coping ways.
Yes, and it's a process. Often they come because they're desperate to get rid of this anxiety so that they can function, so that they can continue doing things in their lives. So they come with desperation, and sometimes they get disappointed when you have to explain that it's a process.
Melanie, you were nodding your head when she says often patients come in, they want you to get rid of it. Was that you? Did you go to your doctor and be like, just take it away today?
So indeed, I walked in there with this beast. And for me, it was a beast because it completely took over my life. And I looked at him and I thought in my head, how is this quiet soul going to help me with this beast? And the first thing when he said to me is that, see the answer that you've worked out in your head? That is not the answer of the process we're going to follow now. So yeah, so that's basically how we started. I completely underestimated. There was the way when I walked in there, I felt this thing is so big. I don't even know if he can understand what I'm experiencing.
Were you ever put on medication?
No, I refuse that.
Why?
No, I'd prefer the counseling methods rather. You know, tablets and me, no. You say,
is there ever a case where you have to use medication, where they don't have the option like Melanie did of saying, I would like to not be put on medication, I just want to have therapy?
Yes, often in extreme cases they may need to be medicated while they go through therapy until such time that they can function without the medication.
But what happens if they don't want to go on medication? Then you're like, okay, I can't help you.
And then they can't access therapy. You do find those cases where people just refuse treatment.
Okay.
And would rather avoid.
All right. Can their family get like are you allowed to go to their family and be like, this one needs this, it doesn't want it. Please, can you get a court interdict?
Go to the family.
Yeah.
Unless the family does that, not you. Not as a physician. Okay. It's difficult to help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
Doesn't want to be helped. That's, you know, as with all problems. So where are you now in life? Are you okay? Can we fly? Can we
fly?
Can we
do
with the door closed?
Yes. So it's helping a lot.
And it's a continuous thing.
Yes, it's a process. So, you know, I'm a year down the line and I'm still continuing this year with the therapy. I don't go to as many sessions because it's helping. You have to practice also. I have to go to that elevator. I have to go to that closed space. I have to go to that bank. So the more you face the fear, as you said earlier on, the quicker I think you heal.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining me. Lerato, you've been wonderful sitting with me all episode. I should share my pay with you. Melanie, you are also wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And a big thank you to all my other guests. I've already said Lerato, Reuben Nakane, Melanie Harrybarran. I hope we've managed to shed some light on the topic for you. Do remember that you can also keep entering our weekly giveaway competition for a chance to win yourself a 5,000 Rand e-gift voucher. Until tomorrow, I'm just going to make sure that there isn't a snake waiting for me in the corridors as I go to my car. But tomorrow, the soil, multiple summer nominees. They'll be here performing for you. Make sure you don't miss it. Tomorrow, Real Talk, SABC 3, 5 p.m. I'll see you tomorrow.